One government decision can raise food prices worldwide overnight, not because there's less food, but because trade can shut down instantly. Food prices spike, fuel prices jump, commodities surge. People blame inflation, whether war or supply chains. But sometimes the trigger is shockingly simple. One government decision. A country that produces a key commodity suddenly says, "We are not exporting anymore." That's called an export ban, and even if the ban affects only one country, it can send prices rising across the entire planet. Because modern markets are connected in ways most people never see. What is an export ban? An export ban happens when a country restricts or completely stops selling a product abroad. Governments usually do this during food shortages, droughts, political instability, rising domestic prices. Fear of public unrest from the government's point of view. The logic is simple. Keep supply at home so our people have enough. It sounds protective. It sounds responsible. But in a globally connected system, that decision doesn't stay local. It spreads. Why modern trade is so concentrated? Here is something most people don't realize. Global trade in key goods is dominated by a small number of exporters. For example, a handful of countries export most of the world's wheat. A few producers dominate rice exports, vegetable oils. Fertilizers and energy products are also concentrated. This means global markets depend on stability from just a few players. So when even one major exporter steps back, the world feels it. It's like removing a key gear from a machine. Everything else has to adjust instantly. The first shock, supply shrinks overnight. Markets run on expectations. When traders hear export ban, they don't wait to see how big the shortage will be. They react immediately. Why? Because global supply has just become smaller instantly. Even if harvests are still ongoing, stocks still exist. Other countries are producing. The total exportable supply is now lower and in tight markets. Even small reductions can trigger large price movements, so prices jump before real shortages appear. The second shock, panic buying between countries. Export bans don't just reduce supply, they create fear. Importing countries suddenly ask, what if we're next? So governments, food companies, and traders begin stockpiling. They buy more than usual. They rush orders. They try to secure supply early. This creates a second shock, artificial demand. Even if real consumption hasn't increased, buying pressure surge and markets don't distinguish between needed demand and fear-driven demand. Prices go up either way. The domino effect. Other countries copy export bans, often spread. One country blocks exports. Another country thinks, if they're protecting themselves, we should too. So more restrictions appear. More supply leaves the global market. This becomes a feedback loop. First ban, price spike. Second ban. Bigger spike. What started as a defensive action becomes a global spiral. Why prices don't quickly fall back once prices rise? They don't just return to normal when the ban ends, because the shock changes behavior. Businesses sign longer contracts, build larger inventories, price in future risk. Governments create emergency reserves, subsidize local production. Traders expect future volatility. So the system resets at a higher risk premium. Prices stabilize, but at a higher level. Who gets hurt the most? Export bans rarely hurt wealthy countries the hardest. They hurt import-dependent and lower-income countries. Because those countries rely heavily on imports, have weaker currencies, spend a larger share of income on food. When prices spike, governments struggle to subsidize. Households cut food consumption. Political tensions rise. This is why food price shocks have historically triggered protests and instability. Export bans and energy. This mechanism isn't limited to food. Energy export restrictions can cause fuel price spikes, transport cost increases, manufacturing cost rises, broader inflation. Because energy sits at the base of almost every supply chain. So an export ban on energy can trigger a chain reaction across multiple sectors. Why export bans feel rational but are systemically dangerous for a single country? Export bans feel like protection, but globally, they reduce trust. Trade works on the assumption that suppliers will continue selling. When countries break that assumption, the system becomes more fragmented. Countries respond by stockpiling, reshoring production, building redundant systems. This reduces efficiency, and lower efficiency means higher long-term costs. The new era of trade fragmentation, the world is entering a period where geopolitical tensions are higher. Climate risks are rising. Supply chains are more fragile. This increases the chance of export bans, which means global price volatility becomes more frequent. The system shifts from efficient and predictable to stable-looking but fragile. The invisible trigger export bans show how one local decision can create global consequences. They shrink supply, trigger panic buying, spread through imitation, increase risk premiums, reset prices higher, and the people who suffer most are often far away from the country that made the decision. In a global system, isolation is an illusion. When one country closes its doors, the shock doesn't stop at the border. It moves through markets, currencies, and supply chains until it reaches the price tags people see every day.